Can we have the PowerPoint up? So when we talk about a tourist visa, what exactly do we mean? Well, first of all, there are many different types of U.S. visas. Work visas, visas for students, and of course, tourist visas, and many, many others as well. Travel.state.gov has a complete listing of all the visa classifications if you're interested in learning more about them. Today's topic, however, is focused on tourist visas. The designation for a tourist visa is B2 visa, though in India we typically combine the tourist visa and business visa designations, the B1 visa, and issue a combined B1, B2 visa. In the overwhelming majority of cases, these visas are multiple entry visas valid for 10 years. So what are the required steps for obtaining a tourist visa to the United States? First of all, applicants must complete the online DS-160 application. This application can be found in a number of different locations. First and foremost, this application can be found at travel.state.gov. It can also be found on the individual consulate and embassy websites. In Chennai, the address is chennai.usconsulate.gov. Remember, you are responsible for any information contained on this application. Any false or misleading statements contained can result in a permanent ineligibility for a U.S. visa. Applicants will also be asked to upload a digital photograph in accordance with this application. The second step is that the applicant must purchase and obtain an HDFC receipt from a qualified HDFC location. Using the online application barcode and the HDFC receipt, the next step is to schedule an appointment through the VFS website. This website can be found at www.vfs-usa.co.in. This website is also provided on the Consulate website as well. Remember, please apply early. In some cases, visa issuances can be delayed, so it is best to avoid any problems by applying well in advance of your travel plans. Applicants are also required to have a valid passport, generally with 6 months validity left. Please remember, passports that are in poor condition with peeling laminates and or other damages will not be accepted. On the day of the scheduled interview, I'd like to highlight a few of our important procedures. First of all, only the applicant is allowed to enter our facilities. Friends and relatives who are not applicants themselves will not be permitted to enter any consulate facility. Please arrive only 15 minutes before your scheduled appointment. Our scheduling system is designed to minimize your time spent waiting, either inside or outside consular facilities. Once you are inside our facilities and pass through security, you will go through a pre-screening process where your biometric information will be collected and the information contained in your documents will be verified. Finally, you will have your interview with the consular officers. Interviews typically last about 3 minutes. Consular officers are trained to make decisions based on several different data points, including documents. It is important to note, however, that documents are never the sole basis for either an approved or rejected visa application. If the visa is approved, we will keep your passport and return it within 5 to 7 days via the courier service. In most cases, applicants may also elect to pick their passport up from the local VFS office. If the visa application is refused, the officer will return the passport and give the applicant a written reason for rejection. Applicants are free to apply again, but we suggest that they reapply only if their circumstances have changed. In a very small number of cases, applications will be placed into pending status, also known as administrative processing. If this happens, it means your visa application was not complete or requires further administrative action. Processing times are different for every applicant. When this processing is finished, the passport will be returned to you with the visa by the courier. Before we begin taking your questions, I'd like to point out that applicants who have previously held a B2 or a B1, B2 visa may not be required to complete an interview under the new interview waiver program. For full details of this program, including a checklist that will help you identify whether you are eligible for interview waiver, please visit www.vfs.co.in. Children under 7 years of age are also no longer required to appear for non-immigrant visas at any posts in India. This exemption covers all non-immigrant visas, including tourist visas. All other rules, requirements, and fees for those under the age of 7 remain in effect. These applications may be submitted through VFS. Please take note of these important website URLs. These are websites that provide you with information about our visas, about our processes, and about the different programs that I spoke about today during the presentation. With that said, I think we'd like to start taking your questions. With the presentation over, if you don't see a video, please reload your web browsers to enable the video to stream to your desktops. Welcome, everybody. My name is Ben. I'm a consular officer here in Chennai. This is my colleague, Abby.
Hi, everybody.
We're pleased to welcome you to our third web chat for non-immigrant visas. We'll be taking your questions live. We're also taking questions that were pre-submitted. So please start submitting your questions to our Facebook and Twitter accounts if you haven't already done so. While the first question gets brought to our attention, I'd first like to address a question that I frequently hear at the various outreach events that we frequently do. Abby, perhaps you can take this question. Something that comes up often. Why didn't the consular officer look at my documents?
Well, as your presentation indicated, the only required information is your application, your passport, your photo, and your receipt. A lot of this is now done electronically, but ultimately those are the required documents. Everything else that you wish to present is what you bring to help show your qualification for the visa. If you have a document that you believe is going to make the case for your qualification, that's something you might want to bring. However, the consular officer has a lot of information available in the application, available in the interview, and sometimes the document isn't needed to make that decision.
Thank you. Anwar Wahid wrote in on Facebook, I wish to visit the U.S. to meet my relatives. I have a business here and am working in Qatar also as a general manager. How should I proceed? Thank you for the question, Anwar. You should first proceed by filling out the online DS-160 application. This application can be found at travel.state.gov. Once you've completed this application, you should go to the nearest HDFC facility and pay the required visa fee. With that visa receipt and your completed online DS-160 application, you may then schedule an appointment through the VFS website. From there, you come to the consulate or embassy for your interview for your visa. Thank you for the question.
We're waiting for the next question to come up, and we have one. Jacob wants to know, Which is the most picturesque state in the U.S.? Where do I get to savor the best steaks? And when is the best time to visit the U.S.? Wow, those are some pretty broad questions to answer. And where do you get the best steaks? Let's start with that one, because that's kind of like asking someone here in India, where do you get the best biryani? There are really good steaks all over the place. You'll probably find a good steak restaurant in any major U.S. city. As far as the best time to visit the U.S., again, there's something to be found in every season in the U.S. And picturesque steak, well, Ben, where are you from?
I'm from Virginia, so I'm a little biased. I'd like to think that we have many, many beautiful areas in Virginia to visit. We have the home of George Washington at Mount Vernon in Virginia. We also have a national park, the Shenandoah National Park.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And all times of year in the Shenandoah. I mean, it's a different place any time of year that you visit it.
Jacob, thank you very much for the question. I think the most important thing to remember about the United States is that it's an incredibly big and incredibly diverse place. You will find many, many beautiful areas throughout the country. So it's best to determine what you're most interested in and then base your selections on your interests. Thank you for the question.
Runny says, I want to go to U.S. near Christmas and New Year. I'm supporting my father in his business, but my agent has told me that you don't get approved with a traveler's visa if you don't have any financial documents in your name. My father was going to sponsor me for my trip, and in that case, do I come for a visa interview with which documents? My father also needs to apply for a tourist visa as he's financing this trip. A big thank you to you in advance.
Ronnie, thank you for the question. As I mentioned in the presentation before we started with the question and answers, documents are not a required aspect of the application. You are not required to bring any documents to the interview. Documents sometimes help in supporting your case, but they are absolutely not required. They are not a required component for the application. You could feel free to bring them if you would like, but again, it is not a required component to the application.
If I could add something too, because Ronnie, you asked about what your agent told you in what you need to apply for a visa. Now, when you're applying for a visa, I know it's very tempting to ask an agent or ask someone else who's gone through the process for their expertise and their experience. Please remember, the only person who's authorized to say whether you do or do not qualify for a visa is a consular officer who's adjudicating your application. While it's tempting to ask advice, there's no person outside of a consular officer who can tell you absolutely with or without certain information or documents you're going to be found to qualify. So remember, take a look at your own application, show how you overcome any ineligibilities that might apply, including presumption of intending immigration, credibility of purpose, and your reasons to come back to India, and make the case yourself. Your agent can help, but your agent is not the ultimate authority.
And Abby, if I may add, that brings up a very important point. Often when we go on outreach, we hear from individuals who wonder whether it's good to have an agent to help them through this process. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Now, there are agencies that can help with the process in providing internet service to do the 160, who can sort of do one-stop shopping as far as getting ready for your application. But at the end of the day, everything in our visa process can be done all by yourself, completely self-serve.
And free of charge.
And free of charge. The fee for the application is the only fee that is paid to the U.S. government. Any other fee that somebody charges you, short of the courier fee, there is a fee for the return, but anything about preparing documents, putting things together for you to take to the consulate or to the embassy, that's all a service being provided by somebody who is getting you ready but doesn't have any influence in the process.
That's correct. All of the information about tourist visas and about all visas in general can be found on our websites. Travel.state.gov is a very good resource for general information about visas, and it is completely free of charge.
And I think we've got some pretty internet savvy folks watching today.
Indeed.
I think that a lot of our audience can probably do a lot of the things that an agent would provide all by themselves.
Correct. So, Chandradeep Bhatia writes, how can I get a tourist visa to the U.S.? Do I need sponsorship from the U.S., or can I apply without that? And what are the supporting documents that I need for my visa application? Well, thank you for the question, Chandradeep. Again, documents are not required for the application for a visa to the United States. During your interview, you must demonstrate that you have the intent to return to the United States. Oftentimes, applicants that are not successful in their visa applications do not demonstrate this. Consular officers are required to assume that everybody at the window is an intending immigrant into the United States before they even begin questioning. Their questioning is asked to determine whether, in fact, the individual has sufficient ties to come back to India after their temporary stay in the United States. And many applicants, unfortunately, are not able to successfully demonstrate that to the consular officer. So thank you very much for the question.
Prakash asks, hi, some tour operators claim it is easy to get a U.S. tourist visa once an applicant's travel itinerary is finalized. No questions asked. Is that true? The short answer is no. The travel itinerary is a part of showing what your travel purpose is for. But as far as answering questions, and I get this question a lot on my outreach, there are some people who leave the interview process and say, gosh, they didn't ask me a single question. Now, there's a big form you fill out ahead of time, the DS-160. There are a lot of questions on that, and every single visa applicant has completed dozens of questions. So that's to start. And then the visa interview as well, the consular officer you can pretty well count on is going to ask you some questions. Travel itinerary is sometimes part of showing that you're going on temporary travel. It might be something that's asked for. It might not be. But you can pretty much count on the fact that you're going to come to the interview prepared to talk about your trip and to talk about your life here in India.
Excellent answer. Okay, next question. Another question for Prakash. I have noticed a talk from the quote-unquote applicant community that a chartered accountant report on assessing the asset value of the applicant would help in obtaining a visa. Would they really help? Some of the visa consultancy firms have a business tie-up with the chartered accountants and civil engineers to make one package price. Are there any authorized consulate panel lists of chartered accountants and civil engineers that do such statements? Thank you very much for this question, Prakash. It's a great question. We hear about a lot from our prospective applicants. And the answer is no. The consulate does not endorse any chartered accountant firm or civil engineer firm to help applicants in preparing the documents. The only source of information that you should rely on from the U.S. government and from the U.S. consulate is travel.state.gov, as well as the individual consulate and embassy websites. This is the only information that you can trust to be 100% accurate. So the other part of the question is whether reports from chartered accountants help applicants in obtaining the visa. And again, it goes back to the requirement that applicants come to the interview with lots of documents. It's very important to underscore the fact that an interview and an application for a visa to the United States does not depend on documents. We discourage applicants from going out and spending a lot of money with these chartered accountant firms in preparing these asset value statements, which may or may not even be looked at by the consular officer. In many instances, the officer does not need to see such documents to make the decision. And in that case, the applicant would have gone to an unnecessary expense. So we discourage applicants from going and using these firms when they're preparing for their visa interview.
If I could also add, the only thing worse than that is finding a chartered accountant statement that's false. If you don't have the
Very good point.
finances, the last thing you should do, in fact, you should never do, is put together any kind of document that falsifies your finances or any other aspect of your life here in India. It's terribly sad when we have an applicant who's otherwise qualified. The chartered accountant statement came into play, and we discovered it was false. And it calls into question the credibility of the applicant. Remember that the notes from your application are going to be part of your permanent record, and if it's determined that you showed false information, whether it was material or not, could have ramifications from questioning your credibility in any application, all the way up to determining a material misrepresentation that's going to make you permanently ineligible to enter the United States in the future. So please, beyond anything else, do not ask anyone or accept any offers to bring documentation that's false.
That's correct. Remember, you are ultimately responsible for all of the application, all of the information contained in the DS-160 application, as well as any documents that you provide to the consular officer, as well as any statements that you make to the consular officer. It's worth noting that we take fraud very seriously in the Department of State when we look at visa issuances. And again, if you are found to have misrepresented any information throughout the process, you may be found permanently ineligible for any future visa to the United States, and we really want to avoid that.
Valarmathi asks, I'd like to get a U.S. visa which would help me fetch a job there. I'm a software professional. Could you please tell me the process or procedures to be followed along with eligibility criteria for the same? You want to start with that one?
Sure. Well, again, today's presentation is focused on tourist visas. And it looks like Valarmathi is asking specifically about work visas, which is a separate topic. Information about work visas can be found at travel.state.gov. I will note, however, that one is not allowed to work in the United States on a tourist visa. You are prohibited from doing any type of productive work in the United States while visiting on a tourist visa. If you are found to have worked or be working in the United States on this particular visa, you would be out of status and you would be violating U.S. immigration law. So we discourage anybody who goes to the United States on a tourist visa or a business visa, for that matter, that productive work or any work in general is not allowed.
And it's also important to note that if you do work on a tourist visa, you're opening yourself up to one of those serious ineligibilities of misrepresentation in the future as well. If you do want to work in the United States, there are ways to do it. Ways to do it properly through the right channels. Doing on a tourist visa and trying to cut corners, you may find yourself permanently banned. Not a risk worth taking.
Thank you for the question. Gurpal Singh Kular writes, I want to visit the United States to meet my relatives, but their visa was refused under Section 214B. What is Section 214B and what should I do now?
Shall I?
Please.
Section 214B is a section of our immigration and nationality law which says that every person who's applying for a tourist visa comes to the process with the presumption that he or she is an intending immigrant. And it is not until the person overcomes that presumption of 214B that a consular officer can legally authorize a visa. Now, how does someone overcome 214B? There's no formula. There's no A plus B equals visa. The consular officer takes into account the totality of the applicant's circumstances. Now, if somebody has been refused under 214B, he or she could reapply and try to make again the case and show how he or she overcomes that presumption of intending immigration. But realistically, without having a significant change in circumstances, the applicant is likely going to be found not to qualify under 214B again. I always recommend that if somebody is refused 214B and they hope to reapply, they should take a look at the totality of their case, look at perhaps why the consular officer felt that the applicant did not overcome 214B, and look to see what could change in the circumstances that might let the applicant qualify in the future. Ben, anything else?
I'll just say that consular officers across India and across the world apply the same adjudication standards.
It's true.
So an adjudication in Hyderabad or an adjudication in Chennai will not be fundamentally different from an adjudication in New Delhi or an adjudication in Mumbai. Unfortunately, consular officers apply the same standards throughout the country and throughout the world. So one decision in one location will likely not result in a decision in another location.
It's also important to notice that 214B, nowhere in that does it say applicants in India or applicants who are citizens of India must show. This is a requirement for every visa applicant around the world.
That's correct. Okay, next question. Nurullah Hussein writes, I want to visit the United States to meet my relatives along with my wife. I am a retired person. Kindly let me know how I should obtain my visitor's visa and what documents are required for obtaining it. Thank you very much for that question. Abby, do you want to take it?
Well, again, our website, which the consulate's website is chennai.usconsulate.gov or travel.state.gov, which are available all over our website, has the information step by step on how to apply for the visa. As far as what you ask, what documents are required, again, your goal is to show that your purpose of travel is to go for a short visit, see your relatives, and return to your life here in India. You're welcome to bring any documents that you think are going to show that you meet that qualification. But there's no set required document, and it is possible that the consular officer adjudicating your case may not require to see any documents. But at the end of the day, what you need to figure out is what you think is going to make your case that you qualify. That said, required documents, passport, online application, receipt for your fee, and your photograph. And a lot of them are handled electronically now.
That's correct. For those that have just joined us in the chat, perhaps it would be useful to go over the steps again for the application process for a U.S. tourist visa. The first step is to go onto travel.state.gov and complete the DS-160 online application. This link can also be found on each individual consulate and as well as the embassy websites. Once you have completed this application and uploaded an appropriate photograph, the next step would be to obtain a fee receipt from a qualified HDFC bank location. Once the fees are paid and you have your fee receipt, you may then go to the VFS website and using the barcode from your online DS-160 application, as well as the tracking number on your HDFC receipt, you can then schedule your appointment to come into any one of the 5 consular visa issuing facilities in India.
Thanks.
Okay, we have one more question.
Go ahead.
Srivatsa writes, Dear Sir, do you plan to open up a consulate in Bengaluru? We need it very badly here.
Well, we here in Chennai do have Bangalore in our district, and we love Bangalore.
We do.
And we do know that we have a significant client base, both in visas and in American Citizen Services in Bangalore. For American Citizen Services, we do have regular outreach. If you are, or your family, are someone who would need passport or report of birth abroad assistance, please visit our website. Again, that's chennai.usconsulate.gov. Click into American Citizen Services, and there's information there about upcoming outreach. We are doing outreach next week in Bangalore, and as well as how to find out about upcoming outreach. As far as visa services, we do stand ready here in Chennai to take your application, and all of our consulates and the embassy here in India are available for you for visa applications.
That's correct. Okay. While we're waiting for the next question to be brought up, a question I frequently get, Abby, during outreach is, how long am I permitted to stay in the United States on a tourist visa?
Excellent question. The other question I get is, I have a 10-year visa. Can I stay for 10 years? There's a big difference between what the visa is and what the time permitted for status is. It's important to remember that the visa, it's not permission to be in the United States.
That's correct.
It's permission to knock on the door. Whether or not you're allowed in, what you can do, and how long you can stay, that's the decision of the person at the port of entry, the immigration officer. Now, typically, for tourist visas, the stay that's granted is 6 months. It's very important when you enter the United States, you'll be given a white card. We insiders call that the I-94. That's going to get stamped with a date. It's very important to pay attention to that date because that's the date that you have for status in the United States. That visa that you have in your passport, you can use that to knock on the door to enter up to the day it expires. So
correct.
you can apply the last day that your visa is good and still be given 6 months to enter. So it's very important to remember the visa does not dictate how long you can stay on a tourist visa.
Thank you. Might I also add that it's very important that you depart the United States
Absolutely.
on the date listed on that I-94 form. So please don't lose that form.
Or earlier.
You may apply. You may leave earlier. You may leave on or before that date. Failure to leave before the expiration of that date could lead to problems down the road for future visas.
And in fact, unless you are granted an extension of stay, if you stay past that date, your visa automatically becomes void. Even though it still looks good in your passport, by law, your visa is no longer usable.
Thank you.
So we have a next question. How do I present myself as a genuine traveler? I am a genuine traveler traveling to attend my sister's wedding and have been refused a visitor visa twice. It's a great question. It goes to, and it's a question that a lot of your colleagues have been asking in other ways. It goes again to presenting your case that you overcome 214B. Now, every case is different. Every case is considered in context. Every case is considered by a qualified, trained, experienced consular officer. So to answer your question, what can you do? I would again say, take a look at your case. What circumstances have changed to show that you overcome Section 214B that we've talked about earlier? Ben?
Again, 214B is a section of U.S. immigration law that requires consular officers to presume that the applicant in front of him or her is an intending immigrant to the United States. And the consular officer's questions will be based on establishing that individual's ties to India to determine if there is a likelihood that that individual will come back to India. Okay? We have another question that's come in via Twitter at Matthew Y. The question is, why is it that the visa interviews for U.S. is tougher than for any other country? Well, that's a very good question.
I guess toughness is in the eye of the beholder.
That's true. I'm not sure that I'm not sure that the U.S. immigration laws are tougher than other countries' laws.
Well, one of the things about U.S. visa applications is for a first-time visa applicant, unless you've held a visa before, we do require an interview. Not all countries do. Some countries can make a decision based off of the application alone. We require an application, but we also require an interview. So it is a chance for every single person to stand in front of a real consular officer and tell his or her story.
That's very good advice. So while we're waiting for the next question to appear on the screen, Abby, a question I frequently get on outreach. People who may or may not be computer savvy often wonder whether it's okay to get other people's help when filling out the application.
It's a great question, and of course anyone can get help. In fact, we encourage people who are not that tech savvy to ask a friend, a relative, even go to somebody who has experience professionally in filling it out. And we expect it so much that we have a spot on the application for you to indicate whether you received help and who helped you out. And that is the place to put it in. If you do have somebody helping you fill out that application, we expect it so much that we have a question for you to go ahead and put that information there. And while we're also waiting for the next, I have something else to bring up. Sometimes people say, I tried to make an appointment like I did 3 or 4 years ago or even 10 years ago, and everything's changed. The fact is that we are constantly making changes to improve our service to the public. So when you are ready to make your application, be sure to go online and see what the most up-to-date processes are. Sometimes the fees change. You want to see what the most up-to-date fee is as well. So all of the information we're giving you today, great information for right now, but make sure you keep our website handy so that when you are applying down the road, that you can see what the most up-to-date process is, most up-to-date fees are. Very good point.
Here in Chennai, that address is chennai.usconsulate.gov. In Mumbai, for instance, it would be mumbai@usconsulate.gov. Hyderabad is hyderabad@usconsulate.gov, etc., etc.
We have a question. It's another tweet. And the question is there any way someone who wants to visit the U.S. but cannot afford it financially could make it to the great country? It's a good question. One of the factors taken into play is someone's financial wherewithal to be a tourist in the United States. So if you're asking the question of how can you get sponsorship, there are many ways that somebody might get invited to the United States. You'll want to talk about that in your interview. If it's a question of going to the United States as a tourist and earning your way across, that's not allowed. Remember, you cannot work on this kind of visa. Ben?
Good point. Thank you. Okay. We have another question appearing now. If I am refused a visa once under Section 214B, may I apply again? How many times can I apply? Well, a refusal under Section 214B no way implies that the applicant is permanently ineligible for a U.S. visa. It no way implies that the applicant cannot reapply for a visa. We generally advise applicants that they only reapply when their situation, their personal situation and circumstances change because, again, we're all using the same adjudication standards. And even though you would be receiving a different officer at your subsequent interviews, that officer will be applying the same adjudication standards and is likely to reach the same conclusion as the original officer. So applicants are not precluded from reapplying if having been refused under Section 214B, but generally here we advise applicants to only reapply once their circumstances have changed.
And also please remember, it is never, ever a good idea to falsify your information because you think that that is what the consular officer wants to see the next time. If you are found to be misrepresenting anything in a consular interview, the consequences can be very extreme for your future application chances. 214B, that's a snapshot ineligibility. It means that on the day that you applied, you were found not to qualify. If you're found misrepresenting material facts, you could have a permanent ineligibility that would preclude your ever being allowed to enter the United States in the future.
That's a very important point. Thank you. Our next question is regarding language interviews. Oh, this is a very good question. My uncle is not fluent in English. He can only speak Tamil. I have heard that he would get refused if he applies for a language appointment. Is that true?
Oh, I'm so glad somebody asked that question. If anybody thinks that that's true out there.
It's a very good point.
Shall we say it together? No, it's not true.
Our officers are trained in many, many languages, including Tamil. So if the officer is not able to do the interview in the language that the applicant has requested, we have translators available at every one of our facilities who speak all of the languages across India. So absolutely not. We do not refuse applicants if they are unable to speak in English. If they are unable to speak in English, we will provide the necessary translator for that particular individual.
It is important, though, that if an applicant is not able to speak in English, that he does sign up for the appropriate language interview so that we do have the resources ready to attend to that person. If someone is not able to take an interview in English, simply don't take an interview in English. Take it in the right language so that we can have somebody who is capable and competent to help translate.
That's a very good point. Oftentimes I get asked whether individuals can bring translators into the consulate. And it's important to note that we do not allow anybody other than the applicant themselves to enter consular facilities. If it is determined that a translator is needed, we will provide the translator at the time of the interview.
Okay, next question comes from BN. My friend who is a green card holder and her husband is a U.S. citizen, and they are planning on adoption from India. Well, congratulations to your friends. Is it possible for them to take the child to the U.S. on a visitor visa during the period of wait before the paperwork gets completed? That is a very good question. And the short answer is that it needs to be determined in the course of a consular interview, in a non-immigrant visa interview. This couple is going to have a challenging time demonstrating the motivations to return to India. But without the context of a consular interview, we can't hypothetically say whether somebody would or would not be able to qualify for a child. But it brings up a good question that we also get asked. If you have any kind of immigrant visa pending, does that automatically disqualify you from a non-immigrant or a tourist visa? Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Pending immigrant visa applications do not necessarily preclude you from applying for a non-immigrant visa. Again, these are facts that are examined at the time of the interview, but one should not assume that if they have a pending immigrant visa application that they do not qualify for a non-immigrant visa. In fact, pending immigrant visa applicants can and often do qualify for non-immigrant visas.
Oh, and that leads to our next question. Wow, we have people who are on the same track. My sister in the United States has applied for my immigrant visa in 2009, which is not yet approved. Now that my mother in the United States of America is sick and she needs me to be there, so can I apply for a visitor visa and travel? Much like the last question we had, you can apply. You are going to show just like any other application, that at the moment you overcome that presumption of intending immigration. Now, will the consular officer take into account that your sister has filed for your immigrant visa and that in the future you may be immigrating to the United States? It will be one factor considered. But the consular officer is also going to consider, what is your life like here in India right now? What's going on with your family in the United States, that the purpose of your trip is temporary, and is going to take that whole picture into context to determine whether or not you qualify for 214B.
Very well said. Thank you for all of your excellent questions. Our next question is, my sister is pregnant in the United States. I've heard that my mother should not give this information to the officer. I've heard that she would get refused. Can you please explain? Well, we always encourage applicants to be completely truthful with us during the interview. In fact, failing to completely disclose information asked of them during the interview and or in the application process can lead to very serious penalties down the road, including permanent ineligibility for the visa. Having said that, having a pregnant sibling or child in the United States does not disqualify for a visa in the United States. So that is just wrong information. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, again, it's what the consular officer is going to look at is the totality of the case. It's going to look at what the circumstances are that would compel somebody to stay in the United States and the circumstances that are going to compel that person to return out of the United States, and take it all into account. So again, there's no A plus B. The way I said there's no A plus B equals visa, there's also no A plus B equals you're not going to get a visa. Every circumstance is looked at on its own context.
That's correct. And every case is evaluated individually. It's very important to point that out. Many people don't understand that, but in fact, consular officers are examining each one of their cases that they look at every day individually. So, let's see. Our next question comes from Daphne Shelton. Aren't there specific guidelines outlined for the consular officers to determine presumption of immigration?
Again, there's no A plus B. The guidelines are to the satisfaction of the consular officer doing the adjudication, and the consular officer is going to take a wide range of factors into account, including the information that's asked in the interview and the information that is in the application. That's why it's so important that every question on the application be answered completely and truthfully, because it's going to be part and parcel of the contextualized circumstances that the officer considers. As far as the specific guidelines, the consular officer makes the best effort that he or she can to evaluate the person's complex and complete context.
Well said. For those that have just joined us in the web chat, thank you for joining us. I think it would be helpful for us to, again, go over the particular procedures for applying for and obtaining a U.S. tourist visa. The first step in this process is to go online at travel.state.gov and complete the online DS-160 application. A link to this application can also be found at each of the consulate as well as the U.S. Embassy's website here in India. And those particular addresses vary. Here in Chennai, we have Chennai at Chennai.usconsulate. Chennai.usconsulate.gov. In Mumbai, for instance, it's Mumbai.usconsulate.gov, etc., etc. Once the applicant has completed the online DS-160 application, he or she would proceed to the nearest eligible HDFC bank location, where they would pay the required consular fees and obtain a HDFC fee receipt. With the completed online application, the DS-160, and the HDFC fee receipt, the applicant would then be able to register for an appointment through the VFS website. The address for the VFS website is www.vfs-usa.co.in. From that website, the applicant can make his or her appointment at any of the 5 visa issuing posts in India. Again, all of these procedures are detailed on our website. Please take time to go through them.
We have another question.
Okay.
Pings asks, I've been told by a consular officer who thought my visit to the U.S. would be, and Ping puts in quotations, premature for a project, when I said I would be visiting the U.S. for some business talks with a client only for a couple of weeks. I wanted to explain to the officer why my visit would not be premature, but I have been refused a visa under 214B. How do I avoid this in the future? Well, Pings, today's talk is mainly on tourist visas, which is the B2, and you're asking a question about the B1. And there is lots of information to be had about the B1. 214B still applies as far as presumption of intending immigration and credibility of purpose. It is important to remember that productive work is not appropriate on a B1 or a B2. What it sounds like, and again, I'm just talking about what you've presented here. I can't consider an application that's not in front of me. What it sounds like is you didn't overcome the presumption of credibility for the productive work. and in the future you may need to just make your case a little more clearly as to how the work is not related to ongoing productive projects. So thank you for your question. I'm sorry that we can't get into too much detail today, but we are talking about tourist visas today.
Okay. We encourage you to continue to submit your questions at our Facebook account as well as our Twitter accounts. We welcome any more questions on U.S. tourist visas.
And we have a question coming in right now. Is taking care of grandchildren construed as work in the United States? And is it possible for the visa, sorry, it's coming in close, okay. Is it possible for the visa to be refused on these grounds? Whether or not the purpose of travel, of visiting and taking care of grandchildren would be presumed as overcoming 214B can only be determined in the context of the interview. If that's part and parcel of what the trip is about, definitely talk about that, and the consular officer will take that into consideration. If it's a question that the grandchildren, that the whole purpose is for that, you might have some issues overcoming presumption of 214B. Ben, did you want to add to that?
No, well said. Okay, looks like we have another question coming in here. Let's see here. Does the port of entry or airport have information about destinations in the U.S.? Obtaining information about the various locations in the U.S. would best be accomplished prior to coming to the port of entry. Airport officials are not equipped to advise you about tourist destinations in the United States. The officials at the port of entry, the primary purpose of those officials is to take care of immigration processing. And unfortunately, they're not well equipped to provide you with information about specific destinations. However, we would encourage applicants to spend a significant amount of time researching various options and destinations in India before coming to the United States.
And again, we have some of our most internet-savvy customers here today watching our web chat. So Visit USA is another idea to plug into your web browser, get some ideas. Each of our 50 states and every one of our major cities has a website dedicated to tourism, to showing the best that their cities and states have to offer.
Absolutely.
You talked about the Shenandoah Park. The U.S. National Park Service also has a website. If you want to get to nature, that's a great place to check out as well.
Yeah, spend some time on Google. Spend some time Googling your favorite attractions, things that you're interested in, whether it be sports, nature, architecture. There are so many diverse things in the United States that are available, and we really encourage you to spend as much time possible researching about these before coming to the U.S. Another a good service that I'll plug here at the U.S. Consulate in Chennai is our wonderful library service. We have a fully staffed library complete with online and print media about various destinations in the United States. And all of this information is free of charge. You must only bring a photo ID and you would have access to any of this information. So feel free to stop by and engage with any one of our librarians here.
So we have another question coming in. Oh, it's a good question too. Visas that have the FNU format, and people ask us all the time what FNU stands for. Here in India, where a lot of people only use the last name bar, they don't necessarily have a good name or a first name in their passport. We use a standard abbreviation there. FNU simply means first name unknown. It's an old-fashioned abbreviation, but it's the one that we use. And the question is, why do Port of Entry's official ask the traveler to get it corrected before the next travel? It's a very good question, and it's one that is best addressed to the U.S. Citizenship and Information Service and the Customs and Border Protection Agency. We do require for our immigrant visas, we do have to have a first name. when it comes to our non-immigrant visas, we can use the FNU or the FNU abbreviation or the convention. I have not heard of anybody being turned around or being asked to have it corrected. Clearly, one of our readers has, one of our viewers has. I would encourage you to visit the Department of Homeland Security's website, and that's www.dhs.gov. That's the agency that has the Border Protection Agency under its aegis, and you might be able to ask them that question.
Okay. Okay, looks like this will be our last question.
And it's a great question.
And it's come in via Twitter. And let's see, he says, Amit says, hello, I forgot to return the I-94 to the airline while returning on a B-1 visa recently. What can be done now?
Shall I
Abby,
take that?
please.
Okay, that is an excellent question. That I-94, if you are on an Indian passport, you'll have a white card. There are some countries that you might find it's a green card. It's not a green card like a residency card, it's just the card happens to be green. That card is supposed to be collected by your airline when you depart the United States. Now, it happens all the time that card doesn't get collected. It is the card that is then sent back to the Department of Homeland Security to show that you have departed the United States. If they haven't collected that card, there's a chance that the Border Protection Agency is not going to properly register your departure. However, you're not the only person this has happened to, I promise. What you need to do is go on to travel.state.gov, and in the browser, punch in I-94. Now, Amit, I see you called it the 1-94, and let me tell you, it's really the I-94. So go ahead and punch that into your browser, and there is going to be an address in the United States that's going to pop up. You're going to take your card, you're going to take your passport, and you're going to Xerox the page that has your entry stamp back to India or whatever country you went to first, and you're going to take a copy of your boarding card. If you don't have the boarding card, don't worry about it. Most important is that stamp in your passport. You're going to Xerox that, you're going to take your I-94, you're going to put that in an envelope, and you're going to send it off to that address in the United States so that you can get your departure properly recorded.
Thank you. While we're wrapping up here, I'd just like to point to some important websites that contain information that's very useful about the tourist visa, as well as other types of visas, including student visas, business visas, work visas, the whole gamut of visas. The first one that I'll highlight here is the website here at Chennai, and that is chennai.usconsulate.gov. And if you're seeking information about visas, you would just click on the visa section, and there's a whole list of information about each individual type of visa, as well as answers to frequently asked questions that we get here at the consulate. And it also contains step-by-step instructions on how to apply for a visa. And I think Abby raised a very good point earlier. Sometimes our procedures change, so it is best to familiarize yourself with these procedures before you come into the consulate on the day of your interview. Okay? Another very good resource for visa-related information is travel.state.gov. That's going to contain general information about visas as well as some additional frequently asked questions. And finally, the VFS website, which is where you would make your online appointment. That website is www.vfs-usa.co.in. All of these websites can be found on our website as well as our Facebook and Twitter pages. In conclusion, I'd like to underscore that promoting tourism to the United States is a top priority of President Obama as well as Mission India. Every year, hundreds of thousands of Indians visit the United States, and the number continues to grow year after year. We hope that you will consider the United States as a tourist destination and look forward to welcoming you at one of our consular facilities. Thank you for participating in today's web chat.
We look forward to seeing you in future web chats. Follow us on Facebook. Remember, Our Facebook address is facebook.com/Chennai.US Consulate. Remember to like us as well. And a recording of today's web chat will be available on our website very shortly.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.